Hi dear students, welcome back to computer science class. We have already completed relational database and some of the terminologies used in relational database in our previous class. Now it's time to look at another very important topic in database management system or in database or in SQL. It's all about database keys. Just before heading to the topic in detail, I'd like to give you why or what makes relational or base keys important, because a well understanding or a good knowledge or thorough knowledge in database keys or simply keys will definitely help you out in becoming a good programmer or a skilled database developer or a programmer. Because in the implementation level, at the time of implementing what database or at the time of what doing database programming, a thorough understanding of database keys or keys will definitely help you in doing a better programming, right? So at that, database keys definitely help you to add constraints, which enhances you in giving integrity, accuracy of data and validity of data. So it is very important. Okay, so now we can move on to the topic. It's all about database keys. Actually, what is a key? You know what database is, right? So actually, what is a key? A key is nothing but a column, right, or set of columns. Here in relational database, the terminology for column is attribute, right? So we can define it in terms of attribute. A key is an attribute or set of attributes that uniquely identifies tuples in a relation. We know a relation is a table, consists of rows and columns, right? Columns and rows. So we'll have number of rows and number of columns, and data is stored in the form of records or tuples or rows. So we have to identify rows. We are identifying rows to get details of a particular student or employee or any kind of entity type, right? So key is simply an attribute or set of attributes, and the main purpose is to identify tuples in a relation. You know why we are identifying tuples? Just because data is stored in the form of tuples or tuples or rows or records. Okay, so that is what a key is. So actually we are discussing, we have keys like primary key, candidate key, alternate key and foreign key. Okay, we are discussing all these keys in detail. Okay, so let's start with what database key. It's a very important topic or very important concept in database, part of database. It's an attribute or set of attributes on the basis of which data is identified or the table is identified, right? Then it establishes and identifies a relation among two or more tables. At the time of connecting, we know in a relation we'll have multiple tables. Okay, so sometimes we have to connect these tables to get data from these tables, means multiple tables, or this can be useful for a single table as well. Okay, so this statement is you multiple tables. Okay, establish and identify a relation among two or more tables. Then this can be identified or this can be used for identifying records in a single table as well. Okay, record within a relation can also be identified with a combination of one or more fields. That is, key is an attribute or set of attributes which can be applied to identify row or rows in a single table as well as multiple tables, or at the time of fetching data from multiple tables we are using the concept of keys at the time as well. Okay, yes. Then we can move on to keys. Okay, and here the first key is primary key. We have four keys for discussion: primary key, candidate key, alternate key and foreign key. So here the first one is primary key. Actually, what is a primary key? Primary key is an attribute or set of attributes that uniquely identifies tuples in a relation, okay, or rows in a relation. I've already told you why we identify tuples, okay, because data is stored in the form of tuples or rows or records. So it's a set of one or more attributes that uniquely identifies tuples in a relation. You know, attribute means column, okay. Yes, tuple or row or record, okay, whatever it is. Yeah. And these are the features of primary key. Always unique. Primary key must always be unique. That is, it must be non-redundant. Okay. For example, when you create a table, for example, for student table, okay. Suppose we have three columns: roll number, name, and marks. Which one will be the primary key? Of course, the roll number. We are setting roll number just to identify tuples uniquely. That is the only purpose of setting roll number. Because using name or marks, we cannot identify a student, right? There may be duplication name, there may be duplication marks, of course. So roll number is added to the table student just to identify tuples uniquely, because there won't be any duplication. It will be non-redundant. Okay. Yes. The second point, arranges tables in its own order. Okay. Arranges table in its own order based on primary key. Then cannot be redeclared or left null. It means primary key cannot be null. Okay. When you say primary key to roll number, at the time of entering something as a record, you cannot leave the space or the field of primary roll number empty. Okay. It must not be empty. It must not be null. Okay. Null doesn't mean zero. Okay. Yes. Null means no value. That is nothing. Okay. You know the definition of null. Null is a value which is unknown, unavailable, unassigned, right? Yeah, it is not neither zero nor a blank space. Okay, yes. Zero is a numeric value and blank space is of course a space. Yes. So it cannot be redeclared or it cannot be null. Okay, there must be a value in roll number and it must be duplication free, right? Non-redundant. Yes. Then only one primary key can be set to a table. There will be only one primary key for a table. Then can be a combination of one or more fields. Of course, in a table there will be only one primary key and it can be a single column or a combination of one or more columns. Okay, let's look at an example. Here we have a table relation name item with 3 columns, 3 attributes: item ID, item name and quantity. Okay, item ID, item name and quantity are the attributes. And which one is the primary key of item? Of course, item ID, because only using item ID you can identify the tuples uniquely, like 101 printer. Okay, yeah, you can see, you can note one thing, there won't be duplication item ID. Okay, item ID will be unique. That is why we use or we set item ID as a primary key. In the case of student, we have seen what roll number is a primary key, right? Yes, there won't be any duplication. So this is all about what? Primary key. So primary key is nothing but an attribute or set of attributes used to uniquely identify tuples in a relation, and these are the characteristics, features. Okay, it must be non-redundant, it must not be null. Okay, it must be unique. That's what non-redundant is, of course, and its own way it arranges, and there will be only one primary key for a relation. And you can see one thing here in item, item ID is the primary key and item ID is also the candidate key, right? And item name is also a candidate key. Then item name is also the alternate key, and we are coming to candidate key. Okay, we have set item ID as a primary key. Okay, so primary key is over. Now we can move on to the second key, candidate key. Actually, what is a candidate key? It's a candidate. Okay, it is a candidate and it is capable of becoming a primary key. Okay, yes, attributes in a relation that are candidates or participants for choosing the primary key. That's what candidate is. Okay, so candidates are capable of becoming a primary key. Here item ID can be a candidate key, or item ID is a candidate key. Of course it is a candidate key because it can be considered as a primary key. And item name can also be a candidate key. Okay, can also be a candidate key, but never, we cannot. Okay, sometimes we can take item name as what? As primary key, not item name alone. Item ID plus item name can be taken as primary key. Okay, we cannot take item name as a primary key. Of course, there may be duplication, but item ID plus item name together, item ID and item name together can be considered as the primary key. But most of the time we use single column as the primary key. Okay, it's already mentioned here, right? Yeah, it can be a combination of a number of fields. Can be a combination of a number of fields. Okay, then we are selecting primary key from candidate keys, right? So it is an attribute, what attributes in a relation that are candidates. Here we have 2 candidate keys, item ID and item name. Okay, item ID and item name. These are the candidate keys, and from these 2 candidate keys we have selected item ID as the primary key. Okay, hope you got the concept, right? Yeah. So that's what it, okay. Then candidate keys minus primary key equal to alternate key. Candidate keys minus primary key. Here these are the candidate keys, right? Item ID and item name. Candidate keys minus primary key, that is item ID, will be the alternate key. And which one will be the alternate key? Item name. Item name will be the alternate key. Okay. Then we are moving on to alternate key. Another terminology for alternate key is secondary key. Keys or columns or attributes other than primary key is called alternate key or secondary key. Primary, secondary. Primary means primary key, secondary means secondary key or alternate key. Okay, yes. Candidate key, that is not the primary key. Candidate key, that is not the primary key. Here candidate key, that is the primary key is item ID, and candidate key, that is not the primary key, is item name. So here item name is the alternate or secondary key. Okay, candidate key, that is not the primary key. Then capable of becoming primary key but not a primary key. Yeah, it is capable of becoming a primary key but it is not the primary key. That is what alternate key is. Okay, this is also capable of becoming a primary key, item name, but we have already selected item ID as a primary key, so there will be only one primary key for a relation, and item name cannot be considered for what setting primary key, so that will be the alternate or secondary key. Okay, now we have the last key, foreign key. You know the concept of foreign element, foreign item, foreign bodies, right? Not a part of its own. That is what foreign is. So the concept of foreign key is used just to fetch, just to retrieve information from multiple tables. Okay, you know, at the time of fetching or retrieving information or data from multiple tables, we have to connect these tables. So foreign key is used to connect relations or tables. Okay, there is a relationship called primary key foreign key relationship or parent-child relationship. Okay, we are coming to it. So foreign key, actually foreign key is an attribute or set of attributes. Normally it's an attribute, okay, that matches the candidate key of some other relation. Okay, let's look at the concept in detail. It's a non-key attribute. What is a non-key attribute? Actually there are two terminologies, key attribute and non-key attribute. Key attribute means part of the candidate key. Okay, part of the candidate key, and non-key attribute means not a part of the candidate key. Okay, and here which are the candidate keys? Item ID and item name are the candidate keys, and of course we can say what? QTY. QTY is non-key attribute because it's not a part of candidate key. Okay, so non-key attribute means not a part of candidate key, and key attribute means part of candidate key. Okay, so foreign key is a non-key attribute whose value derived from primary key of another table. Whose value derived from primary key of another table. Okay, let's look at the concept with the help of two tables. We have two tables, employee and department. Okay, here in employee we have three attributes, three columns: employee ID, employee name, and designation. And in department we have two attributes, designation, desig, and designation. Okay, you can see here in employee, employee ID is a primary key. We know that, right? Yes. Then we have two more, employee name and desig. Then in department, desig is the primary key, right? In department, desig is the primary key, and you can see desig is present here in employee as well. So here in employee, desig is a foreign key. Okay, so we get it. In employee, the primary key is employee ID. In employee, the foreign key is desig. In department, the primary key is desig. So the foreign key of employees, that is desig, which is the primary key of another relation, that is department. Okay, and just by knowing, MGR, DIR, ACC, MGR manager, DIR designation director, ACC accountant. Okay, so just by getting E01, you can derive a number of things, right? E01 is an employee whose name is Ankur, whose desig is MGR, and who is a manager, right? This is a simple table. So we can retrieve information from multiple tables just by connecting. The concept is very simple. The same attribute is repeated in multiple tables. That's it. Okay, the same column is repeated in multiple tables, and that table, that column, that attribute will be a primary key of a relation. Okay, so this is what foreign key is. Foreign key is used to establish a connection between multiple relations or multiple tables, and there is a terminology called primary key foreign key relationship. Okay, yes. So these are the database keys, and let's have a quick revision. Hope you get all these concepts right. Okay, database key means simply a column or set of columns, so attribute or set of attributes that uniquely identify tuples in a relation. We identify tuples just because data is stored in the form of tuples. You know that? Tuples, right? Rows. Yes. Okay. It's a very important part of database or database management system, and it's an attribute or set of attributes, okay, used to uniquely identify. Then it establishes a relationship between relations and inside relation, okay, among two or more tables, or in a combination of one or more fields, or in a table, okay, within a table. The concept can be applied. Yes. Then we have four keys. The first one, primary key. It's a set of attribute or set of one or more attributes that uniquely identify tuples in a relation. Features: always it must be unique, non-redundant, arranges tables in its own order. Okay. Normally it will be a numeric value. Okay. Numeric value, or it can be what, an alphanumeric, like I101, I102. Here in this case E. Okay. You have seen, yeah, E01. Okay. Yes. Then arranges table in its own order. Then it cannot be null or redeclared. Only one primary key present in one relation or one table. It can be a combination of one or more. And here in item table, item ID is the primary key, and we have two candidate keys, item ID and item name, and item name will be the alternate key. Let's look at candidate key. It's an attributes in a relation that are candidates or participants. Means first in the selection of primary key, okay, capable of becoming a primary key. Then candidate key is minus primary key equal to alternate key, okay. Then alternate key or secondary key, candidate key that is not selected as a primary key. Here in this case, what, item name is the primary key, item ID and item names are the candidate keys, and item ID is already selected as primary key, and item name we haven't selected it as, it's also already a candidate key, we haven't selected it as a primary key, so that is the alternate key, okay. Then capable of becoming primary key, but it's not a primary key. Then foreign key we know it's a foreign element. Here we can say in employee, desig is a foreign element. It's an element of department, its own element, okay. Yes. So it's a non-key attribute, not a part of candidate key, whose value derived from primary key of another table. Whose value, the value of this desig derived from another table, primary key of another table, that is desig of department, okay. We have two tables, employee and department. Employee ID, employee name, desig are the what attributes of employee, and here in employee ID is the primary key, and department desig is the primary key, and this desig is present in employee as well. So here in desig of what, employee is the foreign key, okay. It's used to establish a connection at the time of retrieving information from data from multiple tables, okay. So this is all about database keys. You just go through all these topics definitely, okay. Please don't be lazy, okay, because this must be in your mind. Each and every point, every single point must be in your mind, okay, at the time of implementing. So you must understand all these topics thoroughly, okay. So just go through it, okay. So this is all for the time being. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day. See you in the coming videos.